Okay, we're going to look at the fall of the Roman Empire and 8 reasons why they fell. Now, some of these reasons are kind of duplicated because when we talk about the barbarians, there's a couple of different things we can look at there. Also, when we look at the military, there's some things we can look at there. Now, Rome. When we look at Rome, about 300 AD, Rome split into two. Okay, there was the eastern half of the Roman Empire and the western half of the Roman Empire. Now, the eastern half was more where the civilized world had been. It's where Egypt was. It's where all the old empires were. It's where Greece was, Lydia, all these, the Assyrians, everyone had lived out east. Now, the west was seen as more rural. It was not as compact, civilized. This was a newer part of the territory. Gaul, which is where France is today, wasn't conquered until about 50 BC. The Spain, it was taken over in the 200s BC. Great Britain, the island of England, wasn't taken over until about 60 AD. So all of those territories have been taken over a lot more recently. And even the Germanic tribes up in Germany along the Rhine, those spots were seen as being more primitive than the eastern part. When you look at this picture, okay, this is an artist's depiction of Attila the Huns coming across Europe. Okay, we had a bunch of different artist interpretations. Now, the Huns, when they came across, Central Asia has had a long history of these horse soldiers, these horse cultures, nomadic people that rode horses that were warrior-like. Back in the Persian Empire, they called them the Scythians. They lived up in Ukraine, over through Kazakhstan, that area. Now, when we look at the Huns, or we have the Mongols in the 1200s that come across, and they are north of China and Mongolia. They're horse soldiers. The Huns, they come from the east somewhere. We don't know exactly where. I wouldn't put them as far out as the Mongols, but they are out there. And for some reason, we don't know exactly what happened, but the Huns started to push west. And as they pushed west, they pushed other tribes into the European, or into the Eastern and Roman empires. Okay, the Visigoths, they came down into the Eastern Roman Empire. They sacked several cities of the Eastern Roman Empire. In fact, they did attack one of the emperors that was back there, and they were able to wipe out that Roman legion and kill the emperor. That emperor is never found. But eventually, the Eastern Roman Empire paid the Goths to move west, go to the Western Roman Empire. So they moved in the Western Roman Empire. There's one Goth named Alaric. Alaric led a raiding party down into Rome at about 410 AD or CE. He actually sacked Rome and spent 3 days in Rome, tearing it apart, stealing things. If you ever go to Rome, you will see some artifacts where different groups of people raided the city and tried to steal different things from them. There's this one building where you can see where they tried to chop pillars down and steal the pillars to take to another place. It didn't quite work out for him. Now, Alaric died within weeks after sacking Rome, and so the Goths did leave. They moved over to the Iberian Peninsula where Spain is, and they set up their own little kingdom out there. Now, as they moved over there, the Vandals had already been there, but they pushed the Vandals out, and so the Vandals moved down into North Africa. And the Goths set up a kingdom in Spain and to southern France, that area. And so what you see the Western Roman Empire losing territory, losing power. Okay. Another thing that led to them losing power, and there's that kingdom of the Visigoths. Another thing that led them to losing power is the rise of the church. Okay. Now, the Huns did come into Europe, and they did. There's one Hun, Attila the Hun. His brother's name was Bleda, and Attila did make a play to become the emperor of Rome. He arranged a marriage with the Roman emperor's sister, but that night of their marriage night, she poisoned him and he died. But that marriage had been arranged by the Pope, I believe. So the Pope had actually intervened with the Huns as he was attacking the Western Roman Empire and arranged them or helped them get that marriage started. And so the Pope is actually going to rise in stature. The Pope is the leader of the Western Christian church, okay, the Catholic Church. Um, and so as the church gained power in the West, the politics or the government side began to lose power. And so we'll see this actually throughout the Middle Ages too. There's Theodoric, the king of the Ostrogoths. Now you also have northern tribes. It's fascinating to see what these northern tribes were because you have these Jutes, the Angles and Saxons. Now the Angles, they lived on both sides of the North Sea. But the Angles are where we get the name England or Engleland from. England, the island out there, England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, those four united kingdoms they had a lot of different tribes out there. Up in the north, you have Picts, you have Iceni down south in the east. And these people would sometimes unite, sometimes they worked against each other. Now, the Romans never conquered all of the British Isles. Okay, this part that's Scotland up here in the north, they only made it halfway up. They did send, I believe, a legion up into Scotland, but that legion disappeared. They didn't ever come back. Now, Ireland was known as Hibernia to the Romans. And Hibernia means, the place where you hibernate. They didn't see it as inhabitable by people, but there was a great culture out there as well. The Gaels, the people that speak Gaelic, were out in Ireland. But anyhow, as these tribes come in, they populate England. Now, the fall of Rome in England happened fairly quickly in that 400 AD time frame. It seems like they fell apart pretty quickly, and we'll see people like Saint Patrick, who was living in the British part of the Roman Empire. He'd been captured and taken as a slave into Ireland before he came back and became a priest and went back to Ireland to be a missionary. But anyhow, that's what we have there. So we have all these people mixing. Now, eventually we get, the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire, and this may have been with that rise of the church, but the Eastern Roman Empire began to align itself with an Eastern Orthodox Christianity. And so they went from the Eastern Roman Empire to the Byzantine Empire. And this would hang on until about 1453. If you look at the Eastern Orthodox religion, it is very different from the Roman Catholic religion. But Eastern Orthodox is going to be dominant in the East. Roman Catholic is going to be dominant in the West. Now, in the 700s, we have the rise of the Muslim empires. Now, the Middle Ages in the 700s, they called the Muslims Moors. And the Moors had taken over North Africa, and they also taken over Spain. Now, about 710 AD, I believe it was, the Moors, the Muslim empires, tried to invade into what is now France, and they were stopped by a guy named Charles Martel. Charles Martel will be, I believe, the father or grandfather of Charlemagne. Charlemagne is Charles the Great of the Holy Roman Empire. We'll talk about him later on. But Charles Martel, his nickname was the Hammer, and he stopped the Moors from crossing the Pyrenees into France. I believe that was at the Battle of Tours. And so the Islamic part of Europe stayed in Spain. And if you look at Spain nowadays, you'll see a lot of architectural influence from the Moors. And even the language is going to bleed back and forth between the Arabic into Spanish and Spanish back into Arabic. It's kind of sad that the Moors didn't conquer more of Europe because the Islamic Spain area was very advanced. They had streetlights, they had great plumbing, all of those things. One date that sticks out in my brain is 1492. 1492 is when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, but it's also when the Christians in Spain kicked the Muslims out of Spain into North Africa. And so we have Europe is now Christian in 1492 and on, and they see that as a hallmark of their progress. The Christians do, at least. Okay. Now the Vikings. The Vikings. It's very difficult to see when they came out of myth and entered history, but about 700 AD, late 700s, they begin raiding. Okay, so there were people up there, probably during the Roman Empire, that were, small villages, small warrior bands, that sort of thing. And in about 800 AD, they began pushing out of Scandinavia and coming down into Europe. England, Scotland, Ireland, France, Italy. They even pushed into Russia and down into the Byzantine Empire. And so you'll see the Muslims, not the Muslims, but the Vikings all across Europe and even down into in the Mediterranean area. Now, Old Norse Vik means bay or creek, and that's where that word Viking comes from. Okay. There is some of the Viking trails. If you ever travel through Europe, you'll see some signs that says stuff like this: furthest extent of the Viking invasion. Okay, I've driven through France a couple times, and they'll have different signs out there. The Vikings liked the rivers, so they'd follow the Seine, they'd follow the Thames, they'd follow the Rhine, they'd follow the Volga, the Danube, all these rivers, because their boats could go up there and do all that. They could also sail across the ocean. So you see America up there. Vikings actually did have settlements in America, in Canada, Newfoundland, Vinland. There are some settlements they found that are dated to about 1000 CE, about the same time that Greenland had been populated, and Iceland as well. And so the Vikings were very adventurous in where they would travel. And they did have some pretty cool instruments for navigation. Now, when we look at their advancements in history, what all this mixing did is it brought cultures together, and they got ideas. Okay, one thing they got was the stirrup. Okay, if you ever tried to ride a horse, stirrups are very important. If you don't have stirrups, I've ridden a horse bareback. I've ridden a horse with stirrups. Stirrups help out a lot. Okay, we have the framed yoke. This will help you. This will help them pull wagons and stuff with oxen. Pants. Barbarians wear pants. And so when the barbarians started to mix with other European cultures, pants started to replace the toga, the different short robes, that sort of thing that the Romans had worn before. The plow. A wheeled plow is important, something they developed. Butter is a barbarian dish. Okay. Rye bread is another one. I love rye bread, actually. It's very good. The timed candle. So this candle would actually keep time for you. So if you want to know how long something happened, how many candles you're going to burn. We have transparent ox horns for lanterns. And I've seen a few of these in different times. We also have the water wheel for power. Horseshoes. Shoeing your horse is important, because if you don't shoe your horse, their hooves might split and make that horse go lame. Okay, and they also have navigational tools. Now, a lot of this is going to be more medieval, the compass, but the Vikings held this little thing in their hand that would tell them what latitude they were at, and they would use that to navigate across the ocean. Okay, so your assignment, okay, use one of the inventions that we just discussed and create a unique advertisement that would sell your item. Remember that people did not have a lot at this time, and so you need to make them believe that they really need this one item. Requirements: an image, hand-drawn. Okay, I don't want anything that's not hand-drawn. You could put it on slides if you need to. Okay, use one of the advancements that was brought by the barbarians, and there's that list. I think there's about 10 of them out there. And give reasons why this would be helpful to the people of Europe during the Middle Ages. Take a picture and attach it to the assignment. If you need help taking pictures, I can show you how to do that with your Chromebook. It's not too difficult. Here is a advertisement for a castle. Okay, your safety from feuding with your neighbors. Europe has castles all over the place. Maybe we'll go through the robber barons of the Rhine River Valley. But this wonderful holding and its high walls can be your protection in times of need. It provides great safety from invading barbarians, including Goths, Moors, Franks, Jutes, Saxons, Angles, and the dreaded Vikings. You can work the lands, live in a hovel nearby, and share your bounty with the Lord. He, in return, will make unreasonable demands on you occasionally, allow you to hide yourself inside the walls from the hordes of unwashed who come from the east. The cost is only endless labor and unfair treatment. But the protection is modern and convenient. Don't get caught in the cold. Order today. So we'll run through what feudalism is coming soon. Any questions, let me know. I can't wait to hear from you guys, and talk to you soon.